Yeah, so my title is The Benefits of Imperfection. I guess the main message that I will tell you about is that the beauty of life is its imperfection and not its perfection, and that we could learn from this to live in the turbulent world to come. Okay, so I start with this, this painting actually is from Douanier Rousseau. It's actually, you see, like it's a landscape, tropical landscape. It can be the view you have of nature. You know, when you're a kid, you see something that is full of colors, full of forms, surprises, things like this. So that's the view of life, if you want, the view of nature when you're a kid. And later on, what you see is that we've done this with it, right? So we've rationalized nature, we've organized it, we've basically put it under the umbrella of performance. Actually, what we get to is the era of performance. So performance, I need to define it. So performance is the sum of efficacy and efficiency. Efficacy is to reach one's objective, and efficiency with the least amount of means. So when you are performant, you are reaching your goal with the least amount of means. You optimize. Okay? Oh, just the okay. Yeah. It is recorded. Okay, so we are in the era of performance, but actually you don't need me to realize this. You can just look at your day. The way we put, you know, the coffee bowl in the cupboard in the morning, the way we calculate the path from your home to your work, the way we organize our holidays, everything is under the injunction of being performant. And actually, when you look around, it's everywhere. So it's in agriculture, it's in the cities, the way it's organized, you know, like you want to optimize everything, the way we live, the way we travel. But we also see some problems with this world that is under the era of performance. So the first thing, of course, that you can see is burnout, right? The burnout epidemic, that's a manifestation of a world that has gone too far in performance, right? Overeating with performance. The other example of this world in too much performance, if you want, is the type of project that we see and that we praise. Going to Mars. Going to Mars. Really, take 1 second to realize what this project is about. It's to leave a living planet to go to a dead planet. It's a death project. It's a project to die. It's a suicide mission, definitely, right? And if you look at all these Silicon Valley, experts, they all have death projects. It's really what they have in common. They want to die. So don't follow them, or if you want to follow them, unless you want to commit suicide. It's really the bunkers, right? They all want to build a bunker. A bunker is a tomb. It's a death project. MBS wants to build a city in the middle of the Saudi desert. It's a ghost town. They all have death projects. So this is the world of performance is inviting us to die. So maybe it's better to change trajectory and see to have arguments against performance. So I'm going to give you 4 arguments against performance to derail from the cult of efficiency. Because actually we are living in the cult of efficiency, and so I'm going to give you beyond, the burnout, the delirium of these projects, some arguments, some scientific arguments, some systemic arguments against performance. So the first one, optimization weakens. So when you optimize the system, you are weakening it always, whatever the system you're using it. So here, for instance, I take the example of tennis balls that you put in a cylinder. So if you want to increase the number of balls in a cylinder, you have to cut them in half, and then you get what you want. But when you do this, of course, you're not going to play tennis as well afterwards. So you could think that this is a bit of a caricature, right? That we actually, maybe we don't optimize to that extent. Actually, we exactly do this. Each time we optimize, we do this. I'm going to give you examples. So here it's a mega fire in the west of France, near Bordeaux in 2022. What you see is these lines of trees, and this alignment of trees, it's an optimization to increase the yield, right? So that way it's a way to harvest more wood in a faster way. But when you do this, actually you build an highway for the fire. So you optimize a function, an economic function, but you weaken the system. Now it's much more fragile. And it's also a highway for viruses, of course. When the trees are aligned like this, they are going to travel much faster. So optimization weakens. Another example is, of course, globalization. Globalization, it's a gigantic optimization You know, the Suez Canal, for instance, right? The Suez Canal, you optimize, but now we are all dependent on one canal. That is, well, there's 12% of the maritime international trade that is going through this canal. So this is extremely fragile, and we saw it, right? You just need one, you know, peak of wind, one boat that goes in across, and that's it, right? You don't have what you want. And here is an example. So these are electric cars in the harbor of Antwerp in Belgium. These are electric cars from China that are, you know, piling up and are going to destroy an entire economic sector in Europe. Just because, you know, it's the product of globalization. Right? Okay, maybe a last one, Trump. So of course, optimization weekends also applies to democracy, to social systems. So when you optimize digital tools, you also generate social networks that are really pushing for cults, like this kind of things, where you have a bubble of self-conviction that are built, and then you stay comfortably in your bubble, and then you start to be polarized, right? So when you're performant, you're very efficient, and then you go into that you know, canalization, you channel your ideas, and then you get polarized. So there are many other examples than Trump, to be honest. It's really you know, the flat Earth. I mean, there's a lot of diversity of polarization. Anyway, so this is the first argument: optimization weakens. Second argument is the rebound effect. So this is probably the more sadistic in some ways, because, or the more vicious, because when you it's actually a criticism of sobriety or sufficiency. You know, when you want to tackle the socio-ecological crisis, you want to increase the energetic efficiency of the goods. So for instance, you want to make fridges that are using less energy, and you call them sober. And it's true, per fridge, it's more sober. But what happens? The fridge is less expensive, the usage is less expensive, so it's more attractive. And if it's more attractive, then you're going to multiply the number of fridges. You're going to make the fridges fatter. You know? You're going to make smart fridges. You're going to make a wine cellar. And then in the end, the population of fridges is going to consume more energy. And so this is really, it's terrible, because it's good people who want to do the right thing, but actually what they do, they want to do sobriety, but actually what they do ebriety. They actually consume even more resources. So this is true for fridges, this is true for planes and kerosene, this is true for coal, for oil, for anything, the detergent, you name it, right? So we are in the era of the rebound effect. And there are examples that are pretty spectacular. So this is, for instance, the Everest, the Mount Everest. So not every day it's like this, of course, but you can see that this is over-tourism, is the rebound effect on the rebound effect of having planes that are consuming less kerosene, right? So we make planes that are more sober, they consume less kerosene, so they're more attractive, they're cheaper, low cost, and then over-tourism, right? So we are in this era of rebound effect. So if I say it in a different way, sobriety, it's an excellent objective, it's a very bad strategy. Because when you start with sobriety, you actually generate just the opposite. So you don't want to start with sobriety, you want to generate sobriety. So you want to find a way to create the conditions in which sobriety emerge, but not start with sobriety. Well, we'll see what this path can be. So that's the second criticism. So optimization weakens, rebound effect. Third criticism is Goodhart law. So Goodhart law says that when a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be reliable. So that means that when you put an indicator of performance somewhere, it's going to be toxic. Always. Always. Because the human brain, we are not that smart. When you put an indicator of performance in front of someone, then it's very attractive. You're going to only focus on that indicator and you forget the rest. It's you know, it's pushing the reductionistic thinking, right? So then you just look at your indicator and you forget the rest. So this is true for many, many things. So competition sport, right? So if you are in sports competition, you really want to win. What you might want to do is doping, right? So you're going to intoxicate your body to reach the best score. So you're going to reach higher performance, but you're going to destroy your body, right? That's a sports competition under the Goodhart law. There are many other things, cramming before the exam. Cramming before the exam is that you're going to really work hard 2 days before the exam. You're going to pass, but you haven't learned anything, right? That's Goodhart law. KPI in the industry, right? If you follow the financial KPIs, key performance indicators, you're going to kill your company. In France, we have a perfect example, Stellantis, Peugeot, Citroën, like a car company. The CEO of Stellantis, Carlos Tavares, was calling himself a psychopath of performance. I quote, a Taliban of the financial margin. Taliban of the financial margin. So that was his definition. And, well, he basically killed the company. Of course, you can't have only the financial driving the company, right? There's also the extra financial. Right? So anyway, so that's Goodhart law, and it crystallizes the problem with performance, is that it's really a reduction of your vision of the world. And the last one, the last criticism is, I have another one for the Goodhart law, which is more ecological oriented. This is something that maybe you know, actually. This is a company that is doing direct capture of CO2 in Iceland. So it just came out last summer. So this is, you see, like a big fat company that is filtering the atmospheric air to make coal, basically, to transform the air into, carbon, basically, and to reduce the CO2 concentration in the atmosphere. So this is the most stupid project you can imagine, right? Because this is using a lot of metals, a lot of energy, a lot of land, all this to generate very minimal amounts of reduced carbon, and all this to allow other companies to keep on polluting the planet, right? Actually, what they're doing is that they're selling carbon quota. It's a pure financial operation. There is nothing ecological about this thing. This is completely toxic, right? But this says a lot about the minute you do, you want to check your neutrality carbon or something like this, you're going to generate this type of ideas. This is the best answer to the wrong question, right? Excellent answer, very bad question. This is not the right answer. Goodhart law. And the last one, it's the last criticism for performance. So after optimization weakens, the rebound effect, Goodhart law. The fourth one, it's an equation with 3 words. So when you want to perform, when you really put the compass on performance, actually performance is always relative. So when you believe in performance, actually what you really believe in, it's in competition, the most performant. In a competition, who wins? So it's very simple. Who wins in a competition? It's always the most violent. So when you put the compass on performance, you put the compass on violence. And so this violence is against who exactly? So the violence is against the women, the least favored, let's say, like the poor class, and the ecosystems. And this is exactly what we are in. We are in the world of performance that is generating a burnout of humans and ecosystems. You can do a simple exercise. When you see a text with the word efficiency or performance, just replace the word performance and efficiency by violence. And you'll see, immediately, you'll see the other side of performance. It's always violent, performance, always. Actually, when you take a sportsman, a sportswoman doing a competition, that person is violent against their body, right? So it's always violent. It's okay, and sometimes you have to be violent, but it has to be short in time. It can't be a model for a society, right? Okay, so violence against the ecosystem. So you know this by heart, I'm sure, if you're here, is that you are concerned about this. So there are many questions: resource scarcity, climate crisis, biodiversity collapse, global pollutions. So I'm not going to give you a full blast summary of what's going on here. I just want to highlight 2 points. The first point is that when we think of the socio-ecological crisis, usually we focus on the climate, and even we focus on the CO2. Actually, in the media, we talk a lot about the CO2. What is this? This is performance, again, right? We've reduced the complexity of socio-ecology to 1 molecule, CO2. And so what do? We do solutions that are extremely reduced. You saw in Iceland this company that is doing direct capture of CO2, a nonsense. Right? So, and actually when you develop solutions to the climate crisis, I'm not saying that there's not a climate crisis, there is a climate crisis, but is this the best lever for change, climate? So actually when you start with the climate, usually what you do is that you worsen the scarcity of resources, you worsen the biodiversity collapse, and you worsen the global pollutions. So it's by far the worst lever, the climate. Again, it's not by the climate that we need to start. The best lever is not the climate, it's biodiversity. We need to understand that our performance is basically declaring a war against life. That's what we do right now. We are so performant that we are destroying life on Earth. It's very clear. Huh? We've lost 70% of the vertebrate on the continents in 50 years. In Europe, in 30 years, we've lost 80% of the insects. I mean, you know, it's very clear. That's what is happening now. So if we want to start with biodiversity, it's actually, it's very nice, but actually because it doesn't cost too much. It's very simple. You just have to throw some seeds. You can do it at any scales, on your balcony, in your garden, in a field, and at the scale of the world, the first lever for this is agriculture. So if we change agriculture, you know, with agroecology, agroforestry, permaculture, Creole gardens in the Caribbean. I mean, there are really a lot of different solutions. Actually, you have an impact on biodiversity, and it's positive for all the other socio-ecological questions. It's positive for the climate, positive for the resource scarcity, positive for the global pollutions. So it's by far the best systemic lever to change everything on Earth. It's agriculture through biodiversity. That should be the priority number one. So when we talk about ecology, we talk a lot about energy, but actually it's because we've been trapped in this idea that it's the climate and the CO2 the number one question. It's biodiversity, the first one. Okay, so biodiversity first. And the second point I want to highlight is the word in red up there, fluctuations. Actually, when you read all the scientific reports on the socio-ecological questions, whether it's the IPCC report, the IPBES, the IUCN, the World Economic Forum, the CIA, the OECD, in all these reports, they are all saying the same thing. We are leaving the era of the mean to enter the era of the standard deviation. The 21st century will be much more variable than all the previous centuries we've experienced in humanity. Because of mega fire, mega flooding, social turmoil, geopolitical crisis. We are entering into a world of disruptions. And actually, unless you're blind, you've seen that we've already entered that world, right? There are disruptions all the time, in Hollywood lately, right? That's an example, but there are many, many others. So that's really the number one item we should put on the table in terms of a question: how to live in a world that has left the relative stability of the Holocene, and how do we live in a world that is much more fluctuating, much more unpredictable, much more turbulent. Okay, so this is the number one question that we have, and we know that this is the product of the era of performance. Because we are so performant, we have weakened our systems, and now they're going through disruptions. It's the era of multiple disruptions all the time. And so what have we thought about? What are our solutions so far? And this is where you see that we are really in the cult of performance, the cult of efficiency, because most of the solutions we put forward in the media, in the discussions, they are always with performance, with increased efficiency. It's really amazing, right? So we know that performance is the main cause, and the solutions is more performance. So, I mean, precision agriculture, for instance, if I take just one example, precision agriculture, you could think that it's a positive idea because you're going to use drone, the digital, to put less fertilizer, less pesticides, to really put exactly what you need in your plot, right, in your field plot. And you could think, wow, that's good, right? It's sober, right? So you're going to use less chemicals. It's great, right? Okay, so if you just think one step ahead, right? So this is making farmers even more dependent on another technocracy, right? The technocracy of drones, the technocracy of the digital. They were already dependent on fertilizer, pesticides, so you increase multi-dependency in a world that is fluctuating. That's extremely fragile, right? So in case there is a disruption, in case Taiwan gets invaded, China closes its border, what do you do with all this technology, right? Complicated. But even if we forget about this, why do we want the plots to be homogeneous with precision agriculture? It's to maintain monocultures, of course. So precision agriculture is fighting biodiversity. It's against biodiversity. So I'm not saying that we should stop doing precision agriculture, but it should be a niche industry. It shouldn't be the model, of course, right? Again, so performance, you know that if your solution is going to be very performant, it's going to weaken the system, it's going to generate rebound effect, it's going to affect Goodhart law, and it's going to destroy the habitats. It doesn't depend on the system. It's always true. Okay, so we are in this world where we are really stuck, in this loop of performance, calling for more performance. It's really, it's really like a cult. You can't derail. You get, so maybe it's time to derail, and so that's what I suggest today, that we derail together, if you want. And so we can derail with Albert Einstein, who said we cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them. So it's, we don't really know if it's Einstein who said that, to be honest. He said a lot of stuff, so at some point you have to realize that maybe some of it was someone else. But anyway, so the general idea is that if the main cause of our problem is performance, it's very unlikely that performance will also be the solution. And that would be really amazing, right? So of course it has to be something else. So we need to derail from this. And so how to derail? As a scientist, I would suggest we actually face the fact. So the fact that the 21st century will be fluctuating, it's not a question. It's not a prediction, it's what we live already. So it used to be a prediction in the 70s, let's say. Now we are in it. We are in a fluctuating environment, and the fluctuations will keep increasing in the 21st century. So the first question to ask is how to live in a fluctuating world. Any other question is secondary, because this is, a fact, right? How do you live in a world that keeps changing all the time? And so this is a big question, but the solution is in front of our eyes every day. It's in your body. Living systems, they are used to fluctuations. They have been built on fluctuations for millions of years. Any living beings that is not able to live with fluctuations has been erased during evolution, right? It has not survived during evolution. So if someone, somewhere, something is living on Earth today, it's because it's able to handle fluctuations. So maybe there are some lessons, some principles, some laws that we can get inspiration from living beings. Okay, and that's actually the third way, the third way from performance, right? So what can we find in living beings that is so precious that it will help us to live in a world that is experiencing a lot of fluctuations? There we go. So I'm going to summarize it with only one slide. Of course, it's more complex than this, but just to give you the main idea. The main idea is that living beings are robust. Robustness. What is selected during evolution is robustness. So robustness, what is it? Robustness is to maintain the stability of the system despite fluctuation. A system that is robust is stable despite fluctuation. It's like a grass in the wind. A grass in the wind is stable despite fluctuation. And if you look in the longer term, it's to maintain the viability of the system despite fluctuation. So the grass, it's growing, but it can handle changes in water content, in salinity in the soil, so it is viable despite fluctuations. So it is robust. That's the definition of robustness. It's a definition in physics of robustness. A physical system that is robust is stable and viable despite fluctuation. So when I say that, it's very simple, right? The world is going to become more and more fluctuating, so you need to be more and more robust. It's pretty simple. Very, very pragmatic, you see, right? If it's more fluctuating, you want to be more robust. What's more interesting is the lesson from life, from living systems. How come living beings are so robust? Well, living beings are robust because they are not performant. So you see, it's the opposite of what we human societies have been doing. But robustness is not an add-on, right? It's not something you add on a system. You're not, with your current system and then you add a little bit of robustness, right? It's a counter model. It's really the opposite. Or if I can say it maybe in a more nuanced way, the only living beings that are extremely performant are the parasites. The parasites, they are extremely optimized. They lose a lot of functions, but they live in an ecosystem where there's abundance of resources and a stable environment. So if your environment is stable and abundant in resources, you can be performant. You can be like a parasite. And so the humanity of the 20th century is exactly like this. we have the abundance of oil, abundance of resources, and we've been trapped in efficiency. It's an efficiency trap, right? You get more and more efficiency, you have more and more resources that you can extract, and you extract, and then you live like a parasite, and you lose stuff. You know, parasites, they lose their legs, they lose their wings, they lose functions, they optimize, and they become extremely weak, because now they really depend on their host. We are exactly at that stage for humanity, right? So we are like parasites on Earth, extremely specialized. We are all in front of a computer, you know, and we've lost a lot of functions. And now we are entering a different ecosystem, where fluctuation will start to really kick in, right? So this is where the rest of the ecosystem, so the non-parasites, so the symbionts, the ones that are doing symbiosis, so the vast majority of ecosystem on Earth, they are robust because they are not performant. And so here you have a list of words. These words, actually, that's what you see when you analyze living systems. Metabolic network, neuron networks, your brain, a physiological network, an ecosystem network. All these systems, what we find in all these systems, from the molecule to the ecosystem, we find inefficiency, right? Living systems are wasting a lot of resources. They're really, they're really not efficient at all. There's no objective. Just look at the flight of a fly. When you follow a fly, well, you can't really find an objective, I can tell you. Even the evolution, right? The evolution of life. There is no objective. The red blood cell does not want to become green, right? It's red, and we don't know what it's going to become, right? It's really open-ended. Heterogeneity, think of the biodiversity. It's extremely diverse, very heterogeneous. A lot of randomness in many processes. It's called the stochastic biology. It's all the processes in biology that are purely random. There are many, many processes that are purely random. Lots of slowness, lots of delays, a lot of redundancy. Think of the number of leaves there is on a tree. Trees are extremely redundant as a structure. Think of the number of red blood cells you have in your blood, right? Extremely redundant. The number of velocity you have in your intestine. We are full of redundancy everywhere. Inconsistency, incoherence, lots of internal contradictions in our systems. And so this, you can think of this in a different way. So if you have a system where there is no contradiction, it's a cult. It's a cult, right? Everyone is agreeing with the guru, right? Like, Elon Musk is a little bit like our, performance guru right now. So everyone agrees, and we don't question performance anymore, right? Because we don't even need to talk about it. So this is, and when you have a cult like this, it's extremely performant. There is no contradiction, and when the world changes, it breaks. All the cults are breaking at some point because they are really poorly adaptable. So to be adaptable, to manage fluctuations, you need to have internal contradictions, to be soft, to be flexible inside. Your best shield against external fluctuation is internal fluctuations. So you want to have internal fluctuations in your system to be soft inside so that you can handle external fluctuations. And so living beings are full of internal contradictions. And the last thing is incompleteness. So the living beings are incomplete because when they are complete, they are dead. So when you are here, actually your cells are regenerating. Your cells are younger than you. We are a river flow of cells, right? We are regenerating ourselves all the time. So you see the list of words here. It's all counter performance. It's something that is not performant, that is adding leeway in the system, room for change. So this is less performant, but it's more robust. And this is what has been selected during evolution. The room. We add the room. We add more room to be adaptable. So, or if I say it differently, in a world that is fluctuating, unstable, experiencing chronic scarcity of resources, you don't want to be adapted. You want to be adaptable. If you're adapted, you're in a narrow path. You're channeled yourself in a narrow path. So you don't want to be adapted. You don't want to adapt in a world that is changing. You want to be adaptable. So it means that you want to have a plan A, a plan B, a plan C, a plan D, a diversity of solutions, right? So you don't know which one will be the right one. And anyway, this is going to change, so maybe later on it's going to be yet another plan to develop. Okay, so I'm going to give you just one example to illustrate this for biology, and it's my favorite example of body temperature. So if you think of body temperature, so 37 degrees Celsius for us humans, and if you have the flu, for instance, you're going to experience fever, right? So your temperature, your body temperature is going to raise 38, 39, 40 degrees Celsius. Okay, if I isolate the enzymes of your body and I measure their metabolic activity, I will find that their optimum of activity, their optimal metabolic activity is not at 37 degrees, it's at 40 degrees. So that means that at 37 degrees Celsius, your body is not functioning very well. It's actually suboptimal. Your enzymes are not working super well. At 40 degrees, your enzymes are working very well. They are very performant. And I think you see the idea, right? So at 37 degrees, you've kept a lot of room. So your body is not functioning very well, but it's good enough, robust enough, I would say. It's good enough. And then when you have the fever, you boost the performance of your enzymes. And now you can really fight the pathogen, the virus, the bacteria. And then you increase the performance of your immune system. But this is only for 3 days. Huh? 40 degrees after 3 days, 40 degrees continually, and then it's deadly. It's lethal. So you can't keep on being at 40 degrees Celsius. You have to come back to 37 degrees Celsius. And so you see that at 37 degrees, you are robust because you are not performant. At 40 degrees, you are performant, but you are weakening your body. Actually, what you're doing is a burnout of your enzymes. Huh? They're very performant, but you're actually starting to really destroy your own body. So you can't stay at 40 degrees forever. So you see that if I want to take a social equivalent, this would be the fireman. A fireman that goes to the fire is extremely performant. It's actually dictatorial. Huh? You go, you leave, it's like very military. Huh? So that's performance, right? So you're really efficient, effective. You go to the fire, but of course you don't stay for too long. After 5-10 minutes, you get out, right? And someone else is going to replace you. And so the fireman that is not in the fire, while he or she is sleeping, training, waiting for something, that's robustness, right? Not doing something that is performant, just maintaining its robustness. Okay, there are many, many other examples. I don't know if I have another one afterwards, actually. No. Another example is the food chain. Just to really nail the coffin of living beings being sober and economic. Living beings are not performant. So the example of the food chain, it's very clear. So when you have a plant that is capturing the energy from light, the energy yield of photosynthesis, it's 1%. 1%. So that means that plants are wasting 99% of the solar energy. That is not efficient. That is not performant. But this very low yield is necessary to be able to manage light fluctuations. If you increase the yield of energy yield of photosynthesis, then when there is bright light from the sun, the plant would burn. So what has been selected during evolution is plants that don't burn. And so you need to have a very low yield. And when you see an animal that is eating a plant, the energy loss is 90%. 90%. So at each step of the food chain, there is really a lot of loss. This is really not performant. But all these losses are feeding the ecosystem, which in turn are feeding the individuals. So it's really a different way to look at it. Anyway, so it's always the idea that living systems are robust because they are not performant. And you see that trade-off. That's really the lesson from life. I mean, for me, that's lesson number 1 from biology is this. It's an incarnation of the trade-off between performance and robustness. Living beings are robust because they are not performant. Okay, so this is biology, but can this be applied to society? And of course, I guess I have a bias, but I would say yes. Yes, it is. And the first thing is that it can help us to understand the definition of progress, or the new definition of progress, the change in definition of progress. So for the longest time, for the past 10,000 years, since we've invented agriculture, we have channeled the definition of progress as increments of performance. For 10,000 years, we've increased the efficiencies of individuals, of collectives, of technologies, of organizations. It has been the mantra of our society is to increase performance. Always, always, always. And today, you see that curve, it's a bell-shaped curve, so we are on the right. So when, actually I can see it here, we are here. So when we increase performance today, we actually burn even faster our ecosystems. So now we are in the era where when we increase performance, we threaten the viability of humanity on Earth. So the future of progress will not be gains in performance. It's physically impossible. If we increase the performance, we're going to destroy our ecosystems even faster, and we're going to die with the ecosystems. So it's just not possible. Or do we just want to commit global suicide? But it's not going to be possible. So what is the future of progress? So it's very simple. You just need to take a step back and realize that we can change axis. The future of progress will be increase in robustness. It's very pragmatic. The world is becoming more and more fluctuating. The structure, the individual, the organization that will survive will be the most robust ones. By definition, to survive in a fluctuating environment, you want to be more robust. And you see that this is on two different axes, because you can't be very performant and very robust. It's physically impossible. If you're very performant, you're very efficient, very efficacious, or in a very narrow path. In a world that is changing all the time, it's a suicide. When you're very robust, you've diversified, you explore, you experiment, and so, of course, this has a cost in performance, and you can survive because you have a plan A, plan B, plan C, plan D, etc. So this is very pragmatic. What I'm telling you is just, endorsing scientific fact. The scientists are telling us that the 21st century will be fluctuating. When the fluctuations are increasing, you want to be more robust. To be more robust, you need to decrease your performance because there is a trade-off between performance and robustness. Okay, so this is very pragmatic, but it could look a little bit utopian because the investors, they still want, returns, so that's performance. Customers, they want cheap goods and fast, that's performance. Citizens, they want political efficacy, effectiveness, again, that's performance. So everyone wants performance in a world that is going to shift towards robustness. How is this possible? So for this, I'm going to use another analogy, and it's the analogy of the flock of birds. Flock of birds, so you've all seen this, I suppose, like these systems of birds. And this is a perfect example of a system that is shifting. It's a system that is going to the right, and then going to the left, and then going to the right again, so it keeps on shifting, right? It's changing. And you see that when it's changing, the birds are not falling down. It's a system that is, in a very coordinated way, changes, shifting. So how does this work? How can a system like this change, shift like this? So it's very simple. It's always the birds are at the periphery of the cloud that are guiding the group. Because the birds at the periphery, they're the ones who are exposed to the fluctuations. They're the ones who are seeing the predator that is coming, or the wind, so they see the exterior, right? They see the fluctuation. And so they respond, and then they contaminate the heart of the system. So it's always coming from the side to the heart of the system. So this is true for a flock of birds, it's true for fish banks, it's true also for social systems, right? An empire, usually most empires, they've collapsed through an event coming at the margin. So it's the margin that is contaminating the heart of the system. Usually it works like this. So if you want to see the world shifting from performance to robustness, you don't want to spend too much time talking to Shell, to BP, to McKinsey, to the European Union, to Trump, to Elon Musk. This is the heart of the system. This is the obsolete world of performance. It's a death hole. So what you want to spend time on is on the margin. You want to talk to the collective of citizens that are already exposed to large fluctuations and who have already invented the robust world to come. And what's really joyful, I would say, is that the world of robustness is here today. It's not a utopia. It's actually happening now. And what's really, the good news about this is that this is new. 20 years ago, this was not the case. 20 years ago, it was very, very marginal, the robust world, the citizens at the periphery. Now it's really contaminating, and I would say it's between the 2010 and 2020 that it really manifested as a massive movement everywhere in the world. And so I'm going to give you some examples of these collectives that are outside, that are contaminating the heart of the system. So a first example is agroecology. So this is, well, as I mentioned briefly earlier, so when you think of agroecology, it's a response to the negative externalities of intensive agriculture. It was stuck in performance, where you actually build your system on cultivated biodiversity, basically. And so it's always like this. You increase the biodiversity and you replace the fertilizer, the pesticides, the irrigation by the biodiversity. It's providing the same services without all this. And so, of course, this makes the plot much more robust to external fluctuations, because now you are much less dependent on a distant technocracy, and you're also, you have everything in your field, right? And so you could think that agroecology is not, so big right now. I mean, intensive agriculture is very strong in the media. We sort of have this idea that it is dominating in the world. Actually, it's relatively speaking, it is collapsing, because intensive agriculture depends on cheap oil. It depends on working globalization. All this doesn't work anymore. I mean, you saw with Ukraine. I mean, phosphate, the stock of phosphate in the world, it's all coming from Morocco. Now, there's pretty much only one country that has a massive stock of phosphate, and it's only for 20 years. So the intensive agriculture model has 20 years in front of itself. And if you look at small farmers in France, for instance, when they have a small plot and they want to farm, they cannot start with intensive agriculture anymore. It's too expensive. It's too expensive. So we start right away with agroecology. And so a typical example is mixed varieties. When you mix wheat varieties instead of having the best variety, so it's a really small agroecology idea. When you do mixed varieties, actually you make your plots much more resistant to fluctuations in drought, in pathogens, just because you've increased the varieties of wheat in your field. But I can tell you that in 2010 in France, it was 5% of the surface in France that was in mixed varieties. In 2020, in the south of France, it's 40%, 40. So it has shifted in 10 years, and it's not going to stop. Just because the fluctuations are going to increase, and so to survive, the farmers will have to increase their agroecology. And you see it's an inversion. So in the world of performance, we used to use ecosystems to increase production. In the world of robustness, you want to ask how production can feed the ecosystems. So that means that a farmer is not looking for the maximal yield, is looking for the stable yield. How to get the stable yield is if your parcel, your plot, your field is autonomous, robust to fluctuations of any kind, of course. So this is really appealing, and it's happening now. Right? I mean, of course, there's still, the intensive agriculture is still here. The two worlds are still here, but it's a dying crew, the performant ones. Okay, agroecology. Another one is the all repairable. So 20 years ago in Europe, the all repairable, that was, a bike repair shop in a city, right? And that was pretty much it. Now there's not one company that is not including the repairability in its economic model. And it's not even out of virtue or social virtue or ecological virtue. It's a very pragmatic thing. If the globalization is failing, if the borders are closing, if you depend on a microprocessor that is built in Taiwan, it's going to be very difficult to maintain an economic model. So now more and more society are repairing everything. And so there are many examples in clothes. These are a French example, Royal Mer, 1083. But Mobian, that's like a Vespa that are repairable, that you don't even own. Brezelec, that's it's in Brittany. It's a company that is doing electronic for agriculture, repairable electronics for agriculture. So since the 70s, so they were not doing so well, of course, over these years. But now they're opening new companies in the US and in Australia. See, that's the weak signals of a world that is changing. When a very small company that is repairing electronic is doing this, says something. There are many other examples. Well, repair cafes. There are 400 in France. These are like citizen workshop to repair everything, right? So Anyway, so the all repairable is happening now. And by the way, this is where we are really decolonizing the world, because actually what we are going to do with this is that we are going to learn from the margin, so the margin of our Westerner society, but also from the South. Because actually, just to give you a little story, but I gave a talk in a management class in Algiers. And in the management class, I was talking about raw earth, how you can build buildings in raw earth, or even, water channels in raw earth. When I mentioned that, this is a very robust technology, right? Because you just use your current earth and you can build systems like this. In the management school in Algiers, everyone in the room knew someone in their family that was able to build something with raw earth, their parents or their grandparents. In the management class in Paris, I don't think there is this tradition in the family. We've lost it. And so we're going to learn, this is where we really inverse everything, right? We're not going to be the North colonizing the South. It's the South that is going to teach us how to live in a fluctuating world. So the all repairable is one example, but there are many other ways to do this. I mean, of course, it's more complex. Yeah, I'm binarizing a little bit. But okay, the all repairable. So of course, this is changing a lot of stuff, and one thing that is changing is the role of the engineers. So the engineer, the word engineer is from the late Middle Age. The engineer is someone who is building engines of war, catapults, and fortifications. So again, performance, violence, always works. Well, so this was the role of the engineers, let's say, until the 20th century, performance increments through distant technical delegation. But as we enter the world in fluctuation, turbulent, with resource scarcity, the role of the engineers will be to develop robust solutions. And so what is a robust solution for an engineer? It's two things: techno-diversity. So an engineer should not develop the best solution. They should develop a plan A, a plan B, a plan C, a plan D, and they should all be robust. And you want to target citizens' autonomy. So that's why I say it's switching from smart cities to smart citizens. And this is the world of robustness. And so you see, it's very, again, very joyful, the world of robustness. It's much more interesting. There's not so much to regret from the world of performance, right? Because the world of performance is the world of the highway, right? The highway, you go very fast to your destination, but you haven't met anyone on the path. Who wants to live on the highway, on the motorway? I don't think anyone. It's really sterile, right? The world of robustness, it's slower, but actually you have many other ways. You meet a lot more people on the way, right? You shift from the abundance of matter to the abundance of interactions. It's much richer in terms of experience. So, and you see also that the world of robustness is not technophobic, by the way. So it's not technophobic. Actually, when you think about it, it's the world of performance that is technophobic. Because in the world of performance, when we develop very efficient technology, it's actually erasing the previous technologies. It's replacing the previous technologies. So this is technophobic. And each time, we increase the distance between the citizen and the technology. In this room, no one is able to repair their smartphone. That means that we are very distant from technology, right? In the world of robustness, well, not only when we have a new technology and it's robust, we keep it, but we don't erase the previous technology. It's just an extra solution, right? And we want the citizens to do the work, right? We want to repair their thing and everything. So this is robust also by design, right? And technophilic, if you want, by design. Okay, maybe a last example is the organizations as an inspiration. So in the organizations, what we see at the margin of society, it's collective of citizens that are cooperating. And again, it's not a trend. It's an operational answer to a world that is increasing its fluctuations. So there's more and more cooperation. There's more and more cooperatives in companies, citizen convention, cooperative housing, many different examples. I mean, I'm not going to, we can talk about it later on if you want, but it's really increasing. And it's, there's no choice. You know, when it's fluctuating, you have to interact with more people. Otherwise, you know, you go into your bunker and you die. That's pretty much the idea. Okay, so that's examples, and there are many others, where you see this world of robustness on the grow, if you want, and it's going faster and faster. We are actually, like in 2025, we are exactly at the right stage where it's the tipping point. We are really like slowly, you know, the ultra performance, they are really becoming ultra stupid, right? So it's like Elon Musk saying that AfD in Germany is wonderful, right? So a neo-Nazi party, right? So they are not even shy about their, you know, their performance violence, right? So they're into it. So this is the part that is really obvious, and the robust are, you know, rising. So we are really like at that stage. Okay, so of course that's the balance. So if I say it in a different way, when you live in a world that is abundant in resources, that is stable, you do performance all the time. And when there is a crisis, you ask the question of robustness. So this used to be our world. It's still a little bit what we are in, the world of abundance of oil, of natural resources, of human resources. Now that we are entering a world that is much more turbulent, and it's going to be more and more turbulent, it's going to be the opposite. We will be robust all the time, and sometimes we will allow performance. We will allow performance. There should be a good reason to be performant, because when you're performant, you are violent. So it can't be for too long. It's the fireman in the fire. They can be performant, they can be violent with their body, with the fire, but only for a short time, right? You can't be like this forever. Okay, so that's the state of the union, if you want. So we are in this balance. We are changing world. We are actually finally ending the Neolithic age. Because it's been 10,000 years where we've been stuck with performance. We wanted to control nature. And now we've controlled so much nature that we've lost control. And now we'll have to live in a world where we've lost control. That's the world of robustness. So we are ending 10,000 years of road to performance. And now we are opening a new road of robustness. Okay, so of course, when I was taking this example of the birds, there's a little bit of criticism that you could have, because this looks a little bit like, you know, you just have to wait and everything will shift, right? So in some way it's true, the most performant will fail. You can look at Evergrande, Boeing, Stellantis I was mentioning, all the big ones, they're going to fail, the very performant one. But it's a little bit short, right? So it's much more a political thing, right? So I don't want to say that we are the flocks of snow in an avalanche, right? It's not only the system, right? We can actually help the system to shift with less death, less risks, I mean, a different way. So how can we do this change? I mean, I'm sure you understand what I'm saying, that what we're experiencing is not a technical revolution, it's a cultural revolution. It's not a question of CO2, it's not a question of the climate, it's not a question even of biodiversity, of social revolution, it's a cultural revolution. We need to derail from the compass of performance. We need to change this. So how can we you know, accelerate this and change the world and be part of this new world? Okay, so first thing, what you can do is to spend more time on questions. So in the world of performance, we spend a lot of time on answers, you know, on strategy, on business plan, on organigrams, all this, right? So we spend a lot of time on this. So we get the best answers to the wrong questions. So in the world of robustness, you want to spend much more time on questions. So it's much slower, of course, much more heterogeneous. There's more conflicts. You want to play with the heterogeneity of opinions. And so, of course, there are many ways to do this. So, yeah, this is this. So you spend more time on questions. So that means that, for instance, when you have a project, instead of going, you know, being sure that it's the right project and really, you know, look for funding, finding the right partners, and then go straight, before you do all this, you actually explain your project to people who are very distant from you. A baker, a ballerina, an anthropologist, you know, like people who are really far away from you. And when you do this, actually, you're going to expose your project to fluctuations, to criticisms, to what people are telling you. And when you do this, actually, you're going to see that your project is not the right one. It's not the right problem. You haven't tackled the right thing. And then you're going to displace your problem until, after 10, 20 iterations, each time you present your project to someone, it's always going to be the same problem. That problem, if it's always the same, whoever you're talking to, whether it's a geologist or a mathematician, if it's the same problem, then that problem is robust. It's stable despite fluctuations. If it's robust, that's the problem you want to tackle. So what you want to do on your problems is a robustness test. You want to make sure that you are addressing the right question. So this takes a lot of time. You have to question your question with others, with games, with a scenario. I mean, there are many ways to do this. It takes more time, but when you have the right question, finding the right answer is actually a secondary, right? It's mostly the most difficult part is to find the right question. And so, yeah, again, this is really the opposite of what we do in the world of performance, where we spend a lot of time on the answers. So it's, again, one quote from Einstein, who said, if I had 1 hour to solve a problem, I would spend 55 minutes on the question, 5 minutes on the answer. But now we need to take this seriously, right? So do a robustness test on your project. And this is true for anything. Huh? If you build a company one day, if you are in an association someday, in your family, if you have a project, I mean, you can do this. It's really easy to do. Huh? Stress test on your problem. Second method is to have or to go through an internal audit of robustness. So let's say in your organizations, you instead of following the McKinsey route, where you would list the counter performance and avoid them or displace them, what you want to do is actually to list your counter performance, but instead to see how much robustness they add. You want to value your counter performances, your slowness, your heterogeneity, your redundancy, all this, the randomness that is. All this, how can this help the robustness of your organizations? And so this is what's happening now, actually. So it's very interesting. I talk a lot to companies, lately a lot, actually. And they experience a lot of fluctuations. And now the robustness audit, that speaks to them. So just to take an example, let's say, the coffee break. A coffee break, that's not a moment of performance, right? When you're doing coffee break, there's no real objective. You're losing time. Yeah, it's not performance. But what happens during a coffee break is that you increase social links. You increase the feeling of belonging. You also exchange ideas in a random way. And so this is where you actually generate true innovation, unexpected innovation, serendipity, right? And so you see that with the coffee break, you are not performant, but actually you fuel robustness. If you reduce the number of coffee breaks, then you're going to lose robustness, obviously, right? But you're going to be more performant because per hour, yeah, you really do what you're supposed to do. Okay, so that's just, so I'm just giving you some example, but maybe I can, there's just two verbs that are important here. So in the world that is stable, abundant in resources, the world of performance, the verb that really works is the verb to foresee. To foresee. We can't foresee if the world is stable. We can predict what's going to happen. So you can predict. In a world that becomes unpredictable, unstable, with resource scarcity, you don't want to predict, you want to prepare yourself. So you shift from to predict to prepare. So when you prepare yourself, that means that you have a plan A, a plan B, a plan C, a plan D, and it's all robust, right? With local anchoring to your territory. Actually, that's the method 3, to develop the link to your territory. So, when we talk about the socio-ecological crisis, we often say that we don't have time. It's an emergency, it's urgent, so we need to change things fast, so we don't have time. So the trap when someone is telling you that you don't have time is to accelerate. If you accelerate, you fall into the trap of efficiency. You fall into the trap of performance. So if you accelerate, you're not going to ask any question. You're just going to stay on your answer. And if it was deleterious before, it's going to be deleterious afterwards, right? You haven't derailed. You're just going to go faster in the same trajectory. So if someone is telling you that you need to, that it's urgent, that you need to change fast, you need to realize that when we don't have enough time, we have space. We living beings are living, we are evolving in a space in 4 dimensions. 3 dimensions of space and the 4th dimension of time. If we don't have enough time, we still have the 3 dimension of space. So if there is an emergency, you need to reconnect to your space, to your territory. And so one way to do this is to map your territory. to map your links to your own territory. Where is coming your water? Where is coming your energy? Where is coming your food? When you're looking online for something on Google, which is the data center you are using, right? So you map everything. And then you will see immediately in this map which are the weak points. The weak points are the one where there is no redundancy. If your water is coming only from one spot, that's fragile. So you want to double everything, right? At least. So for instance, you want to take water from the rain in addition to the water from the city, to have two sources of water. That's redundancy, right? That is going to increase the robustness of your territory and of yourself. And so you can do this for everything. For energy, you can have different sources of energy. That's how you develop the robustness of your territory. And you see, it's not a question of accelerating the development of solar panels on your roof. It's rather a question of diversifying the source of energy, the source of food, the interactions with your social network. And so that means that the best security in the world of robustness is not, augmented camera or whatever, right? It's the social links, right? It's when it's an emergency, you want to increase the diversity of links. Maybe actually it's something that you can experience yourself. When you're in a train, and then it goes fast, so everyone is in their computer. We are all working in our little silo, right? And when the train stops, and then suddenly there's an emergency, but you don't really know what's going on, everyone takes off their screen and then start to talk to their neighbor, right? So we can do it, right? So when there is an emergency, we cooperate. We start to link to our territory, right? But we need to be aware of this. And the main thing is not to fall into the trap of performance, where you want to accelerate when you don't have time. So here I take the example of Pocheco. So that's a company near Lille, so north of Paris, that is making envelopes, and that's exactly what they did. So they make envelopes, and they did a map of their territory, and then they basically added redundancy with ecosystem services. So they've put plants to depollute the effluent from the machines. That way it's producing biomass, so they have a third way to have energy. They have a collaboration with firemen to get some wild bees to pollinate their trees with what they actually feed their employees and everything. So it's really a full system like this. But you can do this on any land, right? It's really an easy method to develop. And also, maybe just to be sure, this is not a survivalist method. Of course, so you want to develop the redundancy of your territory, to be autonomous in your territory, but you want to also increase the connection between your territory and the other territories. If you only develop the autonomy of your territory and you build a wall against your territory, you're going to fail. This is not robust. You can read Elinor Ostrom, The Governance of the Commons, 8 principles to be robust. And one of the 8 principles is this. You want to connect your territory to the other territories. You need to have recognition from an external entity. If you're only alone in your territory, it's not going to be robust. Right? So active autonomy. It's not autonomy in the sense that you exclude yourself from the others. You're actively autonomous on your territory, but you want to connect to the others. Okay, and I'm almost done. So something that we want to put forward, if you really want to develop your robustness in a systemic way. So one way to look at this is to use health. Health is actually an interesting angle to transform, because everyone responds to health. Health is the way to transform the socio-ecological question that can be very distant into a very intimate question. It's in your own body. It's much more transformative than gigatons of CO2 in the atmosphere. That's really super distant. But actually, your health, that's really, this is talking to you, right? And your kids and everything, right? Okay, so common health. So this is the pyramid that we have in our heads when we are in the world of performance, the stable world, abundant resources. So we think that when we make a project, the foundation of the project should be the economy, solid economy. If you have economic foundation, then you can have social links, social interactions. And if you have social interactions, you will have a little bit of time to take care of the environment. So this is the pyramid we have in the head when we are in the world of performance. This pyramid, as you can say, you can tell, it's very fragile because the foundation is the economy. The economy, it's a mathematical abstraction. there is no physical basis for this pyramid. So if you really want to think about it, actually the physical basis of this pyramid is below the economy. There is a big brick with cheap resources, cheap oil, cheap natural resources, cheap human resources. And now this works. This works. It's what, in biology, that's what we call a parasite. The role of the economy is to exploit the cheap resources. And this works until, well, there is no more cheap resources. It's not acceptable to exploit the cheap resources or the negative externalities. And of course, we are in this era where this is happening for many reasons. It's very prone. So now we need to invert this pyramid. So in the world of robustness, the foundation of any project is the care to nature, basically, to the natural environment. So first, your project should be at the service of the health of the ecosystem. If you take care of the health of the ecosystem, then this will generate social links. If there are social links, then this will create economic models. So the economy is not the constraint, it's the output. It should be the product of our interactions. So you want to put the economy into the social. You don't want to do the opposite. Otherwise, the opposite is to put the society into the economy. So it's to put the society into a mathematical model. This is completely absurd. So you want the economy should be the output. It shouldn't be the input. It should be the output. Just maybe to give you one super simple example, very anecdotal, but just to give you an idea. So if you, let's say, in your organization, in your association, in your land, I mean, wherever, so you put a compost box, a compost box. That's minimal care for nature, right? So composting pile, right? So if you do this, you take care of nature to some extent. Because you have a compost box, you need to manage the box. So you need to have some people who are cleaning the box, who are, transferring it to the maturing box, everything. So you need to have social links. You need to have social interactions to manage the compost box. So the care for the environment is generating social interactions. Now, if you become an expert in composting, then maybe you can sell formations on how to do composting in your local territory. Maybe you can generate a company that is going to repair compost box, and that's economic models. And you see the economy is the output. It's not the input. You start with the care for nature. And here I have two sentences that basically summarize everything I've been telling you today. So this sentence here, that's what we were listening to in the 80s. In the 80s, we were told that we need to ask how our activities impact the environment. When you think about it, this posture is very descending. It's like as if we could control the environment. And I've been telling you all along that we are entering the era of fluctuations. The fluctuations, it's not something we can control. So we don't want to ask how our activities impact the environment. We want to ask how the environment is impacting our activities. It's the opposite. So the level of fluctuation of the environment is going to change the way we behave, the way we live, the way we build our models. And so we need to adjust our activities to an environment that is much more fluctuating. And that, now we are aligned. Now it's okay. Yeah, now we are on land. Yeah? We've landed on Earth, finally. Yeah? Okay, so maybe I think it's my last slide. Of course, this shift from performance to robustness is a change in posture. So, and especially for leadership, for the leaders, for the political leaders, for the company leaders. So a leader in the world of performance, the world that is stable, abundant of resources, that leader is someone who says, I want and I know how to do it. It's very Napoleonian. Huh? So just like you follow the leader, right? So this, to be honest, is not too dramatic if the world is full of resources, because if the leader is failing, there is a lot of resources outside. So you will always find a way to survive, let's say. If you enter the world that is fluctuating, scarcity of resources, the world of robustness, you don't want to have leaders like this, right? So you want a leader that says, I would love to, but I don't know how to do it. So it's the opposite, right? So when you say, I would love to, you shift from to want to desire. So when you put the desire on the table, you create the we, the group, right? And if you say, I don't know how to do it, what you put on the table is the lack of solutions. If you put the lack of solution on the table, you're going to mobilize a collective. And this is very robust, even robust to the leader going away. If the leader is not here anymore, the project will go on. It will propagate. That's robust. Okay, I think I'm finished. Yes, so if you want to dig deeper, there are some literature. So maybe the antidote, that's easy to find. I can send you the PDF, actually. I'll send you. So there's one in French, one in English. That's basically what I've been telling you in 60 pages. It's a manifesto for transformation. And of course, there's the larger book, so La Troisième Voie du Vivant and the Benefits of Imperfection. It's basically the translation of both that you can find in the library. So don't go to a bookstore, especially for the Benefits of Imperfection, because it's extremely expensive. That editor is a bit crazy. So yeah, go to a library to be better. There's a MOOC and there's some resources. If you go to institutmichelserre.fr, there's some resources on formations and things like this. I'll stop here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.